Yo estudié cumplismo hace 35 años, 40 años en la universidad.
No lo creo.
Fui a la Universidad de California.
Wow, en Berkeley.
En la Santa Cruz.
Ah, en la Santa Cruz, ok.
Yeah.
Es ahora... sí, no, es Miguel Altieri que está en Berkeley, creo. Sí, sí. Wow.
Yes.
Yes.
Oof. A lot of echo, Stefan.
So you are an agroecologist, like?
Oh no, I'm really not. I mean, I am passionate and I am a generalist, but I would not call myself an agroecologist just because I don't have the technical background. But I have been working in the field for some time.
Great. I will ask you more when we have the occasion to speak. Yeah, I think the conference room is not connected with us now.
Yeah, because it's from Stefan's.
There was a Bruce Stefan's connection when we saw the... okay.
And how did you come to agroecology? How did you begin to get interested in study?
I was in Rome. I finished Chinese. It happened that I went to FIO for a volunteership where I was working in family farming and managing content in Russian and Chinese around this. And when I learned about agroecology, I thought it was pretty cool, like as a way to really do something and take people out of poverty. I think this is the best that somebody can contribute to, because I don't think I will do it, but I mean, little by little, if we all, I just got fascinated about it, and I kept learning. Even in international relations in China, it wasn't. I somehow connected with agroecology in my research, and I'm back to Rome and IFAD a bit, FIO, and then again IFAD is very interesting with the projects.
I'm sure. Wow. And do you come from a farming background? Is your family in agriculture, or no, you're from an urban area?
No, I'm from, my grandparents are on both sides from the same village. So let's say that there everyone has a parcel, like a home garden, is diversified, of course. And then maybe you have some grain in the fields, or we used to have this 1 hectare of just grain, and then some grapes, I'm very also my family's relatives, like the broader family. They do work with agriculture, so something that belongs to my childhood.
That is good.
I guess the same for you.
I grew up in just outside of New York City in a very suburban landscape. Not there was very little natural area or cropland. But then I lived and worked in Latin America, and that's where I was more involved in agriculture.
Great. In the US, New York is totally different.
Too much density of population. But now I live in Massachusetts, and it's a little bit the accessibility to the countryside. I mean, I have I don't know, what is it? 5 by 10 meters of space in my yard, and then we're close to the state of Vermont, where there's much more land. We have a parcel up there.
Hello everyone. We're having some technical issues. But we are aiming to start in a couple of minutes. So, pourquoi c'est...
Whatever I can find.
Maybe even some seeds that you can.
You can see that in the background where I'm always collecting things from
Can you hear us, guys?
Ecuador and Mexico.
Amazing, yeah. No, that's really enriching, like inside, no?
You are on mute.
Stefan was telling me about the event in the last 90 minutes.
Can you hear me, guys?
No, okay, so they're starting, maybe, okay, because I have 2 hours for 90 minutes, but maybe they start at 9:30 and go for 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I had it there exactly also for 2 hours, but then I need to leave at 5 sharp.
Mhm.
Just today is like that, but let's see.
Mm. And what is your day-to-day work at FUA?
Like what I'm doing, you know?
Are you assigned to some specific projects, I would guess?
Yes, yeah, now in particular to a GCF funding proposal.
Mm.
And it's on adaptation practices, but that are based in nature-based solutions and agroecology. So it's interesting. Now it's a very like concept stage,
Yeah,
but yeah,
those are big, complicated proposals.
it's involving 7 countries. So we are doing all the consultations. It's interesting and challenging.
Mm. What are the countries?
So we have in the Eastern Southern Asia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Uganda, and then in Asia we have Pakistan. So those are the ones that actually want to commit in this type of finance and need this type of finance. In Iraq we have Honduras and Peru.
Oh, great.
So that's where I can't wait to go. Hopefully. To go, yeah. And what else did I miss? Morocco, North Africa.
We have partners in all of those places except Morocco. We haven't worked in Morocco yet.
Okay.
If it continues, it would be interesting to share with you who we're working
Absolutely, good to know. Yeah, definitely, because there we will have some linkages with the private sector for the market side. Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes, Stefan. He wants to stop talking. Okay, we stop talking.
Let's see if that works.
It's a bit of an echo, Stefan.
What we need to... They don't have another microphone who is not connected to the system, so the room can hear.
Hello? Hello? Yeah. Doesn't work. Just... Okay, so I think we should just start. Like, we're having a lot of technical issues, but I don't know how to solve them, and the technicians don't know it either. And time is running, so I would say we just go ahead. As you can see, we're having two speakers online, Daniel Moss from the Agroecokogy Fund and Duenia Popolsi from IFAD. We also have three speakers here in the panel. So yeah, I'm going to introduce them in a bit, but welcome everyone to the session Funding Agroecology as a Pathway to Achieve Land Degradation Neutrality, how funders can best support agroecological initiatives by dryland communities. This event has been organized by BothEnds, which is BothEnds, which is a human rights and environmental organization from the Netherlands, and DryNet, which is a network of civil society organizations present here at the COP that is working to bring the voices of grassroots actors from dryland areas to international spaces like this UNCCD COP. The idea of this meeting is to have an opportunity to bring implementing partners from civil society together with those funding activities in dryland areas and see how they can better align their needs with one another. As the most recent Global Land Outlook has shown, agroecological approaches and regenerative practices are crucial in helping dryland communities increase their resilience towards droughts, towards climate change, towards all kind of external influences that they are facing. And at the same time, we as BothEnds, we've conducted a study in the Netherlands where we come from on funding for agroecology, and there have been various other civil society organizations doing so at the national level but also at the international level. And it turned out that funding for agroecology is still very much limited at the moment. Many countries, when you look at their funding portfolios over the last years, they are only have marginal support for agroecology, often like piloting projects or such. But there's no subsistent funding for agroecology yet. So, and that is actually the case for both bilateral as well as multilateral funding agencies. It's also similar amongst private donors, although there are some shining examples among them. Like, for example, the Agroecology Fund that is present here, and that is all about supporting grassroots organizations implementing agroecology. So to close the gap between the urgency for an agroecological transition and that still very limited financial support that I've just been talking about, we thought that it would be interesting to have a conversation in which we bring those two sides together. And also it's actually not two sides, because I would say it's a whole spectrum of donors, but also of civil society actors in limiting terms of progressiveness when it comes to implementing agroecology. So I think it's important to have that conversation, to learn from one another, and see how we can actually improve both the quantity, but also the quality of funding. So I don't think it's only about that more financial resources are flowing towards agroecological initiatives, but that they're also doing so in a more participatory and inclusive way, that actors on the ground can actually really play an active role in the design and implementation of various funding portfolios. So in that regard, it is great to be able to welcome 6 speakers today. Like I said, we have 2 online, and we would have loved them to be able to participate in a more interactive way than it is now. But unfortunately, the technology is not on our side today. Nonetheless, we will hear from them in a minute, and then if we have questions for them, I can try and post them to them via my computer here. So let me quickly introduce our speakers. Online we have Daniel Moss, who is the co-director of the Agroecology Fund. You can see him on the screen right now. And to be honest, I don't even know whether he's hearing us, so I could say whatever I want about him, but no. He's the co-director of the Agroecology Fund, like I said, together with Angela Cordeiro in Brazil. And he's trained as a community organizer and has, for most of his career, helped strengthening rights-based community organizations in their campaigns for improved public policies, before actually living in El Salvador and Mexico, where he helped social movements in mobilizing resources and defending rights to land, water, and sustainable livelihoods. Then also online we have Duina Popu-Zoil. She's a consultant specialist in specialized in agroecology and climate change, working for the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. And she has looked specifically at agroecology. There's been a recent stock-taking report on agroecology within IFAD's operations, and she has played a central role in that. That stock-taking report has looked at the in-country portfolios of IFAD and how they are relating to agroecology. And I'm sure she will talk more about that in a minute. And then physically present here in the room next to me we have Ansh David Baimey. Did I pronounce it correctly?
It's fine.
Perfect. He is working for CRANE. CRANE is an international organization that is working with grassroots communities on the ground. And for Ansh, after having worked for several years with social movements here in Ivory Coast, Senegal, and other West African countries, he has also closely cooperated with other partners of CRANE across Africa. His main focus is on land grabbing and climate issues, and he has a background in sociology and knowledge management. And then next to Ansh, we have Marioldi Sanchez Sontinades. I hope I pronounced that correctly as well. She's a Peruvian forest engineer with a specialization in social management and project monitoring and evaluation. And she's an associate of AIDA, which is a Peruvian NGO that is specialized in environmental conservation and sustainable development of forest landscapes. And Marioldi has been a former member of the UNCCD CSO panel, representing Latin America and the Caribbean, and she's also a former member of the Science Policy Interface of the UNCCD. And then last but not least, we have Marie-Laure Beck-Niemek. She has over 20 years of professional experience working on natural resource management for sustainable development in close partnership with civil society organizations, local communities, and indigenous peoples. She holds a PhD in natural resource management from the University of Yaoundé, and she is the Sustainable Land Management Program Advisor for the Global Environmental Facility Small Grants Program. So the structure of this session is that I would like to give each of the speakers the floor for 5 minutes to quickly reflect on their current work and how it relates to the scaling of agroecological initiatives on the ground, what is happening already, what are lessons learned, and what can still be improved. And I will actually do that in batches, so we also have quickly room for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. And then afterwards, I would like to open a panel discussion that we have to shorten a bit because of time constraints, in which you can ask questions to the audience, to the members of the panel, but the member of the panel can also ask questions to one another to really make this a learning experience. And yeah, we really want to understand better what are the current barriers in relation to further funding agroecology, and even more importantly, what are entry routes for community-based initiatives to be further scaled up in the future. So I think I will start giving the floor to Ansh, who's next to me, to provide us the perspective of his organization, CRANE, on the topics that I've just outlined. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. I would like to thank all the participants. My name, as Stefan said, is Ange David. I'm from Ivory Coast, but I work for international organization called GRAE, who is an international organization, but we have a very decentralized approach in our work, and mostly we intervene in 4 areas. The first one is the issue around land grabbing, because for us, it's very important in terms of agriculture, how we can have easily access to land. So the land is one of the key things in our work. The second aspect I can maybe mention is the seed issue. And the seed issue is related also to one of the key things we see as very fundamental. So if, for example, we want to practice agroecology, or we want to support community working on agriculture and agroecology, we also have to look that side of the, the issue, the seed issue. That is also come with, of course, climate change, because now all the issue we have this climate crisis, we also have to deal with also good seed that can be easily be accessed to community that can do the farming. So that is also another area of our work, and mostly our work is to support farmers. So across all the continent, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, we focus a lot our work with social movement, but also with farmers movement. So I'm very happy to be in that panel to talk about agroecology and how we perceive, our support to very grassroots communities, farmers, local community in the far village in across Africa. Maybe I will start by sharing a bit one of the work as grain we do. And for example, we was in Yamoussoukro 3 days ago. Yamoussoukro is the second capital city Can I try again? Okay, so only one. Okay. So I was in Yamoussoukro 3 days ago with one of our local partners in Africa, who is Jeunes Volontaires pour l'Environnement, a Pan-African NGO, and mostly, working on climate change, also on agroecology, very strong network of youth. And we spent 3 days in Yamoussoukro. Yamoussoukro is far from here, like maybe 2 hours driving. And it was a very nice experience because we was with farmers organization, we was with women, and we have 3 days of discussion. And because we are supporting agroecology, and I think that is part of GIVE Côte d'Ivoire, the chapter of GIVE International work around agroecology. And I have a good testimony in terms of how this youth group started 4 years ago, involved in agroecology, walking around the country, Ivory Coast, with local women, but mostly with youth, because we cannot talk about agriculture without youth, you see. And that was very interesting in terms of exchange, knowledge exchange with that very key actors, farmers in that city. Because we cannot talk about COP and only stay in Abidjan. We have to go in the countryside. We have to go and meet rural women. And during one of the sessions where I have the chance to discuss with them, to try to understand, because I already have the topic of that meeting, to try to see or to try to understand how best we can support the work in terms of funding or in terms of support. And maybe it is not, easy, but one of the key things when you discuss with farmers, with rural person, you have to understand that we need to support them as NGO, as social movement, a lot around training, because we talk about agroecology, but this type of agroecology we are talking about, because it can also be a bit different of the one who is promoted by big corporate, who is promoted this technology is something. Can I? Okay. So it was very interesting to discuss with that group of women, with that group of youth, to understand. And as GRAIN, for example, one of the key things we also bring is the access to information, because it is key in in the work we are doing with farmers, with community, and a lot of exchange is around how they can access to land. Land is very important. One of the key things, as I already mentioned, also how to access to seed, and mostly good seed, traditional one, the farmers, because we know that farmers are the one who know very well since long time, since millennium, how to use, how to manage the seed system. It is not about all the time looking outside, but in internally in our community, in our village, our parents, our forefathers know how to deal with the issue of seed. And maybe one of other things is also the access to water. You know, it is not necessarily a big irrigation system. Is you know, some kind of easily access to water to take care of the crops. So globally, based on all that testimony, based on all that exchange, what I can maybe said is we have to have a very key and very agile mechanism to give support to community. Sometimes it is not a big you know, support in terms of money, but it is around sharing information with them. It is around support them, training, and that can be a good way for us as a civil organization, civil society organization, to support farmers in our village and to help them to also contribute to feed the community and also to have access to the market. Maybe the last thing, maybe to conclude, is our approach of agroecology. When we talk about agroecology, it is agroecology to feed the people, and it is in the perspective of food sovereignty. We cannot dissociate agroecology and food sovereignty, because that is the key. It is not an issue concerning a large scale, you know, plantation or monoculture plantation, but it is about to feed people. So we have to look how we can easily support them in terms of training, in terms of giving them or helping them in terms of connection, because they also need market. We cannot, at the same time we are promoting agroecology, we cannot continue to open the market for importation. We can also think in terms of policy, because as continent in Africa, our border and our local market is so open. You support community to grow food, you support community to do agroecology, and at the same time, all the market is so open that we have a huge importation, you know, and that came in the competition of the local market. So at the end, our farmers who are growing food in the agroecology manner cannot access to the market. So we have also to look how we can have a good policy in terms of protect our farmers. Thank you for your time to understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Anj. That was quite a powerful statement right from the start. I think GRAIN, the organization Anj is working for, is known for its community-based approach in really trying to bring grassroots level voices also to those discussions like the one we're having here today. So thanks a lot for that. I will quickly pass the mic on to Marioldi. Marioldi is currently sick, so she might be speaking a bit slower, and please bear with her if she has to take some breaks in between. So Marioldi, could you share a bit the perspective from your organization AIDA in Peru?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Stefan. Is this working? Okay. Okay. Now, okay. Okay, well, my organization, which is a Peruvian NGO named AIDER, we are currently supporting a group of farmers in the buffer zone of a natural protected area in the Peruvian Amazon for sustainable land management, including an agroecology approach. And some of the practices that are related to the to agroecology is the agroforestry, the diversification of production, conservation and restoration of forests inside the farms, organic fertilization, use of natural pesticides. This is some of the practices that we are promoting in this initiative. And these practices, of course, are contributing to land degradation neutrality, as the farmers are avoiding and reversing degradation in the lands they own. Avoiding land degradation through the stabilization of current agricultural lands in the farms, which reduces the pressure to the remaining forests, and also through the commitment with zero deforestation crops production for maintaining the access to better markets, and also reversing land degradation as they are restoring degraded lands through revegetation, agroforestry, and restoration. And well, I must say also that this contributes directly to the Paris Agreement by emissions reductions from deforestation and also carbon sequestration in vegetation and in soils. And also to the SDGs in terms of sustainable food production, food security, and poverty alleviation. Well, this is an overview of what we are supporting, our work in Peru, particularly in the Amazon areas. But regarding to the topic of this event and to what kind of financial support do communities practicing agroecology needs, I would like to highlight one component of agroecology that is crucial, particularly for Amazon farmers, the strengthening of land governance at local level. But this component, most of the times, is not properly supported, and the funding that communities receive is more focused in the technical components of agroecology, that is, in the production practices. That's what we have observed in our country and from our experience. From our point of view, the financial support for communities practicing agroecology is not complete if it does not include the funding of participatory and legitimate design and implementation of land governance mechanisms in these communities. And also, this is a big, or one of the main barriers for the scaling up of agroecology and therefore achievement of land degradation neutrality. Land governance is a crucial component in the agroecology approach. I must say that what have we experienced in Peru is that projects, for example, projects that are funded by public funds, these kind of funds most of the times allocate resources to, for example, technical training for production, acquisition of equipment, tools, seedlings, seeds, but they allocate very few resources to training and technical assistance in social and organizational aspects. In the case of international cooperation, there is much more willingness on financing these aspects, and its support is considered in the projects most of the times. But unfortunately, these projects do not last long enough for the governance strengthening processes to reach a stage in which the communities can effectively continue without external support. So let me quickly provide an example for indigenous peoples in my country. Indigenous peoples in my country administrate more than 20% of the lands in the Peruvian Amazon. And indigenous communities' knowledge of the ecosystems is a very important element from our ecological practices. But the current socioeconomic context demands from them several innovations in their traditional land use practices. For example, innovations related to benefit sharing, related to market linkage, and the gap that indigenous peoples have in terms of education, and also the fact that they are in a permanent process of intercultural exchange, require of relevant financial resources to support them for adapting, in some cases building, new structures of land governance in a way that they are able also to maintain and strengthen their cultural identity and their traditional knowledge in the light of the current climate crisis, the increase of threats to their welfare. So these activities, this scenario poses a big challenge, both for CSOs, like either supporting communities, and also to the financial partners, because we are talking about long-term social processes that require relevant volume of funds. And also this support is related to activities that, as I mentioned before, sometimes are not prioritized or are not of the preference of some financial partners. For example, workshops, internships, also salaries for long-term technical assistance. Sometimes this is something that is not like of the preference of, as I mentioned, some financial partners, but they are really needed in scenarios like these ones, when you have a big challenge of supporting governance, supporting socio-cultural processes of long-term. So the possibility of having at least medium-term financial support for social, cultural, and socio-organizational issues is small, according to the current terms of funding available. So agroecology is not only about a set of practices. I think it's something that my colleague here mentioned. It's a social movement. for the transformation of current food production, and therefore governance component of agroecology needs to be properly supported. That's what I could share now, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mariodi. Marie-Laure, shall we first go to the online speakers to have some diversity in what we see, and then you can provide the final short pitch from your side? Is it okay with you? Your short pitch. I would first let the online speaker speak, and then it's your turn, yeah? Okay, share Daniel. Okay, so the next speaker will be Daniel Moss, who, as I've introduced already before, is the Executive Director, Co-Executive Director of the Agroecology Fund.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You can hear me okay and see me. Excellent. I'm Daniel Moss from the Agroecology Fund. Very sorry I can't be with you there in person, but thank you so much for accommodating me here on the screen. So I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes about how we see the funding landscape for agroecology at the Agroecology Fund. And I thought maybe it might make sense to share briefly our theory of change, because that informs a lot of the ways that we prioritize our funding and the way that we look at the funding landscape. So here's from our theory of change. The primary protagonists at the center of the agroecology's theory of change are agroecology movements. They organize constituencies, conduct real-time field research, construct new economy food systems, and apply political pressure to win agroecology-friendly public policies and programs. These movements are composed of a diverse groundswell of allied organizations and networks advocating for equitable and sustainable food systems and resisting policies, institutions, and vested interests that undermine such systems. The Agroecology Fund applies its resources to the intersection of where funders, consumers, policymakers, all collect. I'm assuming I can still be heard. Let me know otherwise. So that's just a bit about the theory of change of the Agroecology Fund. We are ourselves a network of primarily private philanthropic organizations from the US, Europe, and Asia, about 40 in all, that have come together to provide support to agroecology movements. And I think that the term movements for us is kind of fundamental, because it really has the grassroots actors at the center of the action, at the center of the levers of change, that they're in relationship to their constituents, farmer constituents, consumer constituents, and they're also actively engaged in pushing for public allocations of funding and program for agroecology, and working in concert with their public officials and also with private investors as well. So where we see support is needed, I'm going to run through the questions that Stefan has provided with me, and let me know, please, Stefan, when I'm reaching the end of my time. So we find that holistic strategies in which agroecology is perceived in all of its multidimensionality are important. One aspect of funding, which again sort of undergirds all of our funding, is that it needs to embrace a whole food systems transformation approach with agroecology at its center. In other words, agroecology is not just a set of farming practices, although importantly, of course, there needs to be funding for such transitional farming practices. But when you talk about practices, it's also important when you're funding, for example, a training center or an agroecology school or a biofertilizer manufacturer with local inputs, that it's also connected to advocacy work, for example, to shift the terrain, to shift the allocation of public subsidies from imported chemicals to manufacture of local imports with public support. And similarly, that we fund quite a bit of agroecology schools and local extension methodologies, but similarly, it's important to fund work that also might allow for some advocacy, some collaboration between private actors, the farming sector, with public research and public extension counterparts, so that there's beginning to emerge a systematic change. And similarly, on the question of finance and banking, that obviously credit, especially working capital, is critical, important for funders to allocate funding for small savings programs, that kind of thing, but at the same time to try to influence the banking sector, because we know that the transition to agroecology is not a small thing. That's needless to say, and it's a very long-term thing, and it involves a shift of priorities and actions by institutions. And in that sense, the collaboration with local officials is critical, from mayors to National Ministry of Agriculture, even to be able to participate in these kind of settings that you all are at today. Critical that farmers are at the center of these advocacy of these kind of deliberations where policies are and priorities are established. And importantly, I think that where support is needed is this kind of then infrastructure of movements. I mean, the kind of work that enables farmer organizations to reach out to their constituencies. Again, putting farmers at the center of it, so that there needs to be support to these organizations to be able to do work in their communities, to bring people into meaningful contact, things that affect their livelihoods, and come together to learn, to influence, to shape policy, and shape, importantly, funding flows. Because, again, we're very mindful in the world of private philanthropy that we're small, we're catalytic, we're looking to provide support to organizations and networks so that they can in turn influence much larger philanthropic flows from bilaterals, from multilaterals, and most importantly, from public budgets. And where support is also needed is in the research realm, but importantly, the kind of participatory action research in which farmers are at the center. Farmers are co-creators, co-generators of knowledge, where it's not just simply a professionalized research center academic, in which the farmers are more the subjects of the research. In this case, the funding is necessary so that they can build their own capacity as experimenters in the field and collaborate with their counterparts in academia and public research. The kind of funding mechanisms that we offer are to collaboration. So again, with this kind of movement building ethos, we fund a lead organization, but the lead organizations aggregate cooperation with multiple actors in the public and private sphere. So the collaboration is key to it. And intersectional, so there's a certain amount of research going on, a certain amount of private farmer practice, a certain amount of movement building. We look for that kind of multifaceted approach to the work. Likewise, as I said, advocacy tends to be an important part of the financing that we offer. So if they are in turn leveraging other cooperation with other public and private agencies, that's critical. And importantly, we provide support to communications, because at the end of the day, the ability of the grassroots actors to tell their story, to generate evidence, and to use that evidence to influence other farmers, mayors, ministers of agriculture, all that is an important part of knowledge co-generation, and then ultimately dissemination, storytelling, data presentation. All of those are important elements. But generally speaking, I think that at the end of the day, we need to provide general support as much as we can. We need to provide, listen to the organizations and find out what they need in order to do the kind of work that we've been describing, this kind of holistic approach to agroecology. So, Stefan, how am I doing there? I need to wrap up? Okay, should I wrap up there? Okay, so I will stop there, and I realize there's some other questions on the table, and I look forward to getting to those in due time. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for Daniel's input. It's also nice to have someone like the Agroecology Fund here, because it's a sort of intermediary between some of those bigger organizations that we will hear in a minute, but also some of those civil society actors on the ground. And I think that they can, or they are actually fulfilling a quite important role. I think for the next speaker we will still stay online. And we'll have Doina Puzoy from IFAD telling us a bit about how IFAD is looking at agroecology and what they've been learning in in the most recent stock taking report on how their operations are supporting agroecology in the moment and how they can do so better in the future. So, Doina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I hope that everyone can hear me. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. So I would like to just briefly introduce about what IFAD is doing regarding agroecology in dryland context. IFAD has a long-time experience in supporting governments, providing co-financing to help local communities living in dryland areas. The poorest are at the heart of the IFAD mission, and because they are the most dependent on natural resources. Agriculture is both a potential important factor of ecosystem degradation and a key player in its restoration. We had the chance to look in depth at this type of interventions that are based on agroecological approaches by following the results and conclusions of the stocktake report on agroecology that has been conducted in 2020. It's a report that included 207 projects that completed in 2018 and 2023. We could notice that 60% of these projects, they were implementing agroecological practices. And regarding financing, about 60% of IFAD financing was going on projects related to agroecological practices. Let me just briefly tell you about a couple of examples of projects. We have one in Sudan that concluded in 2019 called the Butana Integrated Rural Development Project that aimed at sustainably improving the livelihoods and resilience to drought of the rural household. It impacted about 63,000 households in 378 pastoralists and agro-pastoralist communities. This is the 80% of the population, and the 80% of the population targeted by the project are no longer categorizing themselves as poor. This is one of the big results achieved. It's important how the project focused on natural resources governance and management, and also having this territorial vision. In this case, networks of communities were formed. They had a joint vision and land use planning, including pastoralist and mobile communities. They were focusing on conflict resolution mechanisms and the establishment and management of forest and rangeland reserves. And they were strongly using the traditional knowledge of the elder leaders. Then an important policy process was building on the natural resources governance framework for the Butana. That is the bottom-up, consisting in a bottom-up forum series is to develop this framework, solving issues on water, forest, rangelands, livestock, and small-scale rainfeed farming. Another example is the community-based integrated natural resource management project in Ethiopia. It had a similar approach. IFAD co-financed land rehabilitation activities to overcome land degradation following an agroecological approach by engaging local communities in the management of the natural resources they own and use, benefiting about 300,000 poor rural households. The main focus was to secure communities' access to land and natural resources, while also integrating sustainable land management principles based on traditional knowledge, again, and policy frameworks that could help them to increase the resilience and adapt to a changing climate. Some recommendation came out from the stocktake. In general, it was observed that the private sector co-financing is very limited for all projects in the sample. With a 0% support for agroecology-based projects, this is how we classify the project, that are directly linked to agroecology and partially linked. So we noticed that this is an opportunity. It's revealing a clear challenge and opportunity to consider for the future. Another suggestion is that under the IFAD's new private sector engagement strategy and in relation to sovereign investment projects, IFAD could seek partnerships with private impact investors and identify business cases and related financial instruments that are best suited for co-investing with agroecological entrepreneurs, working with small-scale producers in aggregation and commercialization. So we're also speaking about governments and access, but in this case to markets. And we need to understand the role of private investors in this, engaging with the local communities, including in dryland areas where mechanisms on differentiation markets can transform local food systems and guarantee producers and consumers access to diversified and nutritious food. I will get back to you later with some questions, but I think for now, yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Duenia. Thanks for providing us with a perspective from IFAD and that very important internal report that they've been publishing recently. And now we'll pass on to our final speaker, which is Marie-Laure from IFAD, from Jeff's Small Grants Program. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I would like to share with those who are here how the GF Small Grants Program is working with civil society organizations and local communities to support agroecology. First of all, I would like to clarify that promoting agroecology is one of the area of work of the GF Small Grants under the strategic initiatives on agriculture, fisheries, leading to food security. And for us, it's very important to support local communities in this area. And our support is a two-pronged support, is a financial support that is provided to civil society organizations and also to community-based or community-driven initiatives that are channeled through country programs. Actually, the GF Small Grants Program is operating in about 130 countries. And in these countries, we are dealing with local communities and indigenous people, and we provide support to them in these various countries. So the projects or the initiatives that are designed by and for local communities and indigenous people can be sent to the country programs to request for support. So the support can range from, let's say the range is from 25 to with a maximum of $50,000 US. And this support is provided for projects in different GEF focal areas. Agroecology, as you can see, is a component that is in a sort of like a nexus among biodiversity conservation, land degradation, and climate change. So it is like a nexus of these three focal areas. So supporting a project that promotes the use of agroecologic technologies or practices is in a certain way contributing to these three Rio conventions. So this support is provided to communities also in terms of capacity building. And this capacity building can be done either through trainings by more skilled civil society organizations, but also by linking the grantee partners or the communities with state technical services from the Ministry of Environment and Forests, from the Ministry of Agriculture, from different technical ministries that can provide this support. And it's important to mention here that in a community, we make sure that there is a blend of local actors that contribute to promoting agroecology. Let me just mention to you one of a regional initiatives that was implemented from 2019. It is here in the drylands of Africa. Let me just mention it. It's a strategic or innovative partnership between SOS Sahel and the GEF Small Grants Program. And this innovative partnership has 7 participating countries: Senegal, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and also Cameroon. In these different countries, local communities and civil society organizations were supported in the implementation of agroecology methodologies and technologies. Now, the support varies according to the context, the local context of the communities. But there is a set of technologies that were supported, and it's important here to mention that local and indigenous people in the various contexts already have their traditional, or let's say, their traditional knowledge. They have a way of doing. So the support is not coming in a bare land or in a bare community, but it's to come now to see how this, what we can consider as empirical knowledge, or let's say that they don't have expertise. This is what we usually think, but for us it is a bottom-up approach. It's using what they are having to come and now support it with some science-based approaches, but to make sure that this is blend together to make agroecology be part of their way of doing, because these communities have always had agroecology as a way of doing. Maybe they did not have the scientific names we are using today, but they used to have it. Is now the support, the means that we are bringing is to make this happen and to make this to be documented, to make this to be shared across different landscape, to be shared across different countries, and see how this can be replicated, how this can also inform policy, because we want to see a change in the way these community issues are being addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, thanks for all the contributions from the 5 different speakers. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, it would also be great to include you as a audience here and ask some questions for the speakers. But as a preparation for this meeting, I asked the speakers themselves whether they would have certain questions for the other speakers. So some of those funding organizations for the other funding organizations, some of the civil society actors to the other civil society actors, but most importantly also in between civil society and funding organizations. And I think one question that Doina has prepared is that she would be interested to learn from some examples of other funds how they've actually managed to engage with local private sector entities to the benefits of local communities and the sort of investments that are needed for agroecological entrepreneurs that are part of those communities. So I think it's also something that Daniel had mentioned before, that aspect of making projects, making agroecological work also bankable. And then we have to be, of course, bankable. We have to be careful with that term. If we remind us what Ansh was saying, that there are different kinds of agroecology, and we also want to make sure that it's not getting diluted by being made bankable. And I think Doina wants to give a brief intro of why she's actually asking that question. So I'm quickly giving her the floor.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So yes, I would have a questions to the funds present at the event. Regarding the IFAD agroecology stocktake that I was mentioning before, we found that co-financing ratio for the projects that promoted agroecology was smaller than the one for non-agroecological projects. And this was due to lower levels of international co-financing and as such collaboration with international financial partners in projects with agroecology activities than in conventional projects. So domestic co-financing, we noticed, on the other hand, presents similar or high levels for agroecology-based projects compared to the ones that are not linked to agroecology. This could indicate the interest of governments and local partners in investing in agroecology, presumably because of its contribution to sustainable food systems benefiting the vulnerable populations. So it would be interesting to learn what are some examples of successful experiences other funds have in engaging with local private sector entities to the benefit of local communities, and maybe other forms of investment with agroecological entrepreneurs reaching those communities. Thank you.
Shall I jump in? Okay, thank you. Well, just a quick word. I mean, Duina and colleagues from IFAD, we really applaud this effort at stock taking. We know it's not an easy exercise to kind of look inside a portfolio and to determine what is agroecology, what is agroecology related. And, you know, we in the Agroecology Fund and collegial donors subscribe to the 13 principles of agroecology as described in the high-level panel of experts report to the Committee on World Food Security. And I think that's an important framework for all of us as donors as we look at our investments. And currently we're working with IFAD and others on a kind of more global stock taking. So in addition to the looking inside each individual donor agency institution, to look as a collective group and to make our investments transparent, accountable, understand what we're investing in, and also be able to determine where the gaps are. I think that's critically important. So thank you for taking the lead on that. Just a quick issue. I mean, one of the things that was put out in the questions is the question of where agroecology funding is currently, to the extent that there is some support to the sector. And you know, one of the things that we see amongst our partners in the Agroecology Fund is that there's some support for producers that are inside export-oriented value chains, cacao, coffee, et cetera, which is very important, and we're happy to see that. But where we see a real funding gap is getting financing for small producers that are inside local value chains towards local agroecological markets. And we think that that's an important kind of missing element. We're actually we're supporting the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa on a conference that they're having on agroecological enterprises and territorial markets. And you know, since agroecology is by nature such a localized food system, we think that kind of solving that problem of getting working capital to small producers to figure out their production issues, but also importantly their marketing issues, that kind of flexible financing is really critical. And we as the philanthropic sector, we as multilateral financing institutions can do some of that, and we do in small share. I mean, you can see some of the amazing successes in India, for example, with the natural farming work, that's all based on saving circles of women producers that have been able to pool together resources and then invest in their farms. But we think that that's really important too, to be able to work with local financiers, especially public forms of financing, to encourage their investments in these kind of small emerging businesses that desperately need financing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the contribution of Daniel. Marie-Laure, can I also ask you to provide a reflection from the side of Jeff, Small Grant Program, on how to basically involve private entities at the local level more strongly in the sort of work that you're doing? Maybe you're doing it already, and then it would be great to hear how you're doing it. But I think it would be interesting for Duina also to hear your side of that question.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I would like to say that in the work the GF Small Grant is doing for the promotion of agroecology, we want to support local communities to shift from the sustainable agriculture for an agriculture of transformation that is really important for us, a transformation of consumer labor for production system, and also in refocusing on increasing efficiency and effectiveness of the overall food production system. So to have value chain addition processes, it is important to bring private sector as part of the local actors or the actors that are supporting the work of civil society organizations. So we have some of the commodities where local communities are working using agroecology technologies. I can cite, for example, here in Cote d'Ivoire, we have the cocoa. But we also have in some other areas, we can have tea. We have also cashew nut. It depends. And we know that some of the, not really the end users, but we know that private sector is involved in the processing of some of these commodities. So in some of our communities, we are bringing the private sector in to support, even if it's a pilot initiative, and see how they can support it. Because some of our local community supported initiative can be later on upscaled to become maybe medium size of big size projects. So in some areas where we have supported projects with the government, we have had some private sectors, entities who come to support communities to make sure that processing of some of the commodities respect a number of rules so that the end product that is coming from the agroecology supported initiatives can respond or can meet the requirement for local, regional, or international markets. So we have had some examples that had happened. But it is important to build the capacities of some of the civil society organizations because they don't yet have the capacity to negotiate or to interact with the private sector. And this is also part of the work that I think that in terms of promoting agroecology, we have to bring these additional capacities to the local partners, to the grantees to be able to interact, but also to negotiate, to have a conversation with the private sector so that the rights of the local communities, those who are involved in the value chain, can be recognized, and recognized in the way where sometimes their prior consent is required and respected. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Marie-Laure. I think that last point is a very important one, that rights-based approach actually in relation to agroecology, and it also links to one of the other questions that actually Daniel wanted to ask to the rest of the group, and that I'm going to quickly read out because it very much aligns to the last words of Marie-Laure. And it's actually the question to all of us that are eager to support agroecology. It's about, as agroecology gets more and more mainstreamed, I think we've all heard it quite often during this UNCCD COP, different actors mentioning the importance of agroecological approaches and regenerative practices, which is a good thing that it's finally on the agenda of something like the COP. And I think we're not yet there having a decision on agroecology, but that might be something for one of the COPs ahead. But what Daniel is asking is, how do we prevent actually that cherry picking is happening, and that different actors, funding actors, but also implementing actors, only focus on certain aspects of agroecological production, while actually underfunding some of those other crucial aspects of it. And then he's mentioning specifically the rights-based elements of agroecology. So that we actually avoid having some sort of greenwashing, but that inclusive aspect, and that links me brings me back to the pitch that actually Marioli was holding in the beginning, where she was highlighting the importance of the governance aspect, the social side of, the social movement side of agroecology. So I would like to start with Anj, actually, who considers this, I think, a very important aspect as well, that the cherry picking is not happening. And I think in your introductory speech, you also mentioned that you are for a particular kind of agroecology. So maybe you could elaborate once more on what that agroecology is about and how we could, as a group, basically ensure that this is mainstreamed and not only certain aspects of agroecology.
Thank you, Stefan. One of the things we highlight as a group is because I think we can see how there are different, interests. I want to use that term because you can see how maybe private sector are also, defining agroecology in the way that people can just maybe be in kind of value chain to and linked to the market, and that is not the way of agroecology we are promoting and we are trying to to implement and to develop with community, because we think about agroecology, as Marion said, as a movement, as a social movement. So we see also that aspect. It is not just about quantification or of fertilizer, or no, it is a movement. It is another things, So for us, agroecology is to reach the food sovereignty. We cannot talk about agroecology in silo, So it is not about linking all the small farmers to the market, to the global market, or doing what they call bio. No, it is more than that, So our approach in terms of agroecology is to feed people. It is not only about linking them and put them in kind of big plantation or big size of the thing. That is not our approach in terms of agroecology. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Anj. I'm just asking Duina from IFAD whether she could also reflect on that question from the side of IFAD.
Yes, Stefan, just to clarify, is this Daniel? I'm unmuting, but it's, yeah, muting. Now, just to clarify, is this Daniel's maybe turn for the question? Yeah.
My apologies. And I'm sorry, I'm not tracking. Is that the question about underfunding rights-based elements? Is that what you're referring to? Okay. Yeah, just a quick, I think it's been very, I mentioned in my comments earlier, I think having the framework of the 13 elements of agroecology are very helpful for donors to coalesce around and to use those principles as their kind of true north or their compass in terms of how they approach their funding. And I think that's it's also showing up within what's called this emerging agroecology coalition, to which over 30 countries have signed up, and numerous NGOs and farmer associations. So I think the more we can come together around a robust set of holistic principles, the more we can hold ourselves accountable and each other accountable to these kinds of elements. What we often see, unfortunately, is, again, as I mentioned earlier, that agroecology tends to be described as a set of farming practices exclusively. And if you do that, of course, it is fundamentally that, and that's very important. But if you miss out on the other elements of indigenous rights, gender equity, et cetera, you're missing out on the important elements of transformation. And importantly, I think that if we're really talking about a mechanism where we're going to create a real food systems change, addressing those rights issues are fundamental. to making the change that we seek. And so, and in terms of gathering people into a movement, which is the kind of energy that we require in order to make those changes. So it's kind of in a sense, even from a kind of instrumental point of view, it's shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit if we're not helping people protect for example, their territorial rights, their rights to natural resources, because by working together on the practical elements of agroecology with the right-based elements, we're able to engender a much more robust movement. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Now I would actually like to open the floor for questions. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question to one of the speakers? If you have it to several, one's fine. If you have a question to a specific speaker, please indicate. Otherwise, I have still a whole list of questions, but I would also like to provide you with the opportunity to ask something.
Thank you. 1, 2, test the mic. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Sena Aluka. I come from Togo. I work with Jeunes Volontaires pour l'Environnement, based in Togo, but other countries, and we're very happy to be partnering with most of the organizations present here, and for whom we like to express our gratitude first. Then, to address 3 issues. First one is what agroecology is as a concept being discussed here. At times it's also a matter of concern to us. Are we all talking about the same thing? Are we all looking for funding for the same thing? Because as you can see during this COP, almost every type of organizations organize side event or made statement calling for agroecology, and yes, so we start discussing it as a concept itself. So I'd like to hear from Frida and my colleague Daniel and you as well here. What do you think we need to do? Because if we don't very well sweep our room, funding is already very scarce. So we start fighting tomorrow with those big companies coming and taking all the small funding that's there, you know, and at the end, you know what will happen. Small scale farmers will be left again outside, as always. So it's good that we preserve our territory. What are we talking about? For what are we mobilizing the funding for? Second one is to FIDA, the IFAD. Yeah, we have seen that the last report from the HLPE, the high-level panel of experts, FAO, called for agroecology as the best step forward, the best vehicle to fight climate change, etc. But we have been waiting for FIDA to take the lead. But of course, we'll be working with small-scale farmers, supporting them financially. But we have not been seeing that funding channel to small-scale farmers, supporting them, because funding is an incentive to support people developing something again. And thirdly, how can we ensure funding for the value chain? So we get funding from grain, from IF, but it's just for one aspect, maybe for the seed. Maybe some small funding just to build 5 or 3 youth enterprises. How can we connect the dots so that even though we can solve all the problems, at least if we can take 1 or 2 countries or 2 communities, we make sure that we connect all the dots. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Do you also have a specific question to one of the speakers? Or was that more of a reflection?
Well, that was a question to all of them. I hope they got my question. Eh?
Okay, but I think there was a second question somewhere, right? So let's first go to that one, pick some questions. Where was it?
I think it is here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello everyone. Basically, I have a specific question for IFAD representative and also from the GF. Basically, my question is, I have 2 questions. Number 1 is actually I have met with the CEO of GF recently on an event. So where he have given the emphasis on the youth engagement on the related issues. So my specific question is that from the IFAD and GF, what is the actually your priority and the mechanism for the youth on the agroecology and the related implementation process? So what would be the mechanism for the youth, and if there have any priority, if there have any special opportunity? Because in my observation, the CSO led by youth, and particularly the youth related the initiatives, is basically the facing most funding related problem. And so is there have any opportunity or any plan for the youth to get the priority? That is the number one. Number two, I am coming from Bangladesh in South Asia. So you know that in South Asia, people are actually now suffering salinity problem. We are continuously facing different sort of natural calamities, and also warming is increasing. And our agriculture is under threat. And also recently, every commodity price is actually increasing due to the Russia and Ukraine war. So my question is that what is the support mechanism for the climate affected countries, particularly for the LDC countries in coming days, for your actions and the implementation process? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Okay, so shall we first go ahead with that question, which is specifically addressed to two of our speakers, and then we go to that other relevant question from Sena on what are we actually talking about when we talk about funding for agroecology. But first, let us hear from IFAD, and then Marie-Laure can maybe also provide a reflection from the Jeff Small Grants program. But first, Duina, on the question of youth.
Okay, Stefan, it's me, right? Okay, so yes, a very, very interesting question. In the project that I was mentioning before in Sudan, in Butana, there was the experience of involving youth graduates in technical assistance to the rural communities. And the interesting part was that the majority of them were women, young women that were training the rural communities on agroecological aspects, and the communities women farmers and basically agropastoralists, they were empowered by those young women. So it had also a double role of both involving young people, but also functioning as a gender empowerment tool. Another example is also in Brazil, when in a project targeting the rural population, benefiting the rural population of the Bahia, northeastern Bahia, young rural people are also coming in as leaders of their communities. And they promote the technical assistance program. And it's important also their role in how they see agroecology as more attractive for them to engage in agriculture. So this can also solve the issue of migration because of lack of opportunities in the agricultural sector. Youth, for example, can be engaged also in the production of bio-inputs, and we also have some quite interesting examples in IFAD on this. So if you want, I can also share something more about this. But yes, this is just a few examples of how this can work, including for young people and their important role in promoting agroecological approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duina. For this reflection on how IFAD is dealing with the topic of youth. Marie-Laure, can you provide us some insights from the Jeff Small Grants program?
Okay, thank you, Stefan. I would like to, first of all, to clarify that the support that the GF Small Grants is providing to civil society organizations, one of our priority target group are youth and women. And for us, it's very important because we know that these are like those who can really drive the change that is expected from local communities using agroecology. Because for us, agroecology, as I said before, is in a nexus on working on climate change, working on land degradation, sustainable land management, but also contributing to biodiversity conservation. For example, during the last COP, the COP 26 on the climate, there was a coalition of youth civil society organizations that were supported by the GF Small Grants Program during 6 months before the COP to rally youth civil society organizations around the world with a survey to know what are the needs, what are the difficulties, what are the challenges. And during this COP26, they came and they presented what they were doing. Now, in terms of agroecology promotions, in the various countries, we have supported projects with youth. I can take a recent example of a project that was supported in Zimbabwe about 3 years ago. It was a project with youth, but it was a project with young scholars from primary schools, where they conducted agroecology project to support their school in producing parts of the food stuff that were used in their food program in school. Because you have some schools where children, if they don't come to school, they will not have at least 2 meals per day. So we have supported a project in Zimbabwe with youth from about 15 schools who have used agroecology technologies and approaches to work in their schools, in their school areas, to develop, to practice really agroecology, and now transform the way the communities was doing agriculture, the way the community was doing fish farming, the way the community was even doing rearing livestock. So this is an example that I can bring forward. The other thing that I would like to clarify here is that in each of the countries, or each of the country programs where the GF Small Grants operates, according to what are the priorities of the countries, youth organizations are always welcome, and they submit their project proposals, and these proposals are really considered. So now, agroecology is part of a packet of technologies that can address several issues that communities are facing. So you have to, the civil society organization, we are inviting them to deal with the country program, or to go through towards the country program team to know what are the priorities. But we always have youth linked to climate change or to sustainable land management supported initiatives where they can apply in most of our countries. I think that this will also, it is also an opportunity maybe to invite some of the civil society organizations who are here to come tomorrow at the Rio Convention pavilion. We'll be having a side event there to share an overview of our sustainable land management portfolio, and we'll also be sharing some of the examples on the work we did with youth. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks a lot, Marie-Laure. I think that aspect, and I think it was also mentioned in the beginning by Marioldi, that that knowledge aspect, that agroecology is a very knowledge-intensive process, and that working with youth, working on the educational sector within your country is, I think, a great way to actually raise awareness on agroecology, but also transmit knowledge on agroecological practices and approaches. I will now also pass the mic to Daniel online, who also wants to give a brief reflection on that question. And then we come to the other question that was asked. I think he's actually incorporating a response to that question already in his response.
Okay, Great. Thanks for the opportunity to a couple more comments. So yeah, I think that this question about greenwashing and cherry picking, I mean, one of the things that we have tried to build into our form of funding is that we intentionally have gathered advisors that are embedded in various activities, pastoralists, researchers, people working more closely with indigenous communities, women leaders, people working on from communications points of view. So in other words, trying to break out of the silos a little bit and try to assemble an advisory board that's not donors, so that they don't have, I mean, we each as donors, one of the complications, of course, that encourages cherry picking is that we each have our own programmatic priorities that we're trying to further as institutions. So if we can amass advisors that have a really holistic point of view, that really are looking at the various aspects to really address people's issues of rights and livelihood, sustainability, we can begin to articulate funding that addresses those multiple needs, that has all those kind of co-benefits. So one thing that we found, we had a global gathering just before COVID in India, where we brought all of our partners from around the world to study the natural farming process in India. And one thing that we heard from them was that it's important to dig deeper into territories, to really try to address the multiple issues that occur in any given landscape, in any given municipality, that allow for a new food system to emerge. And so hearing that, we started to develop these regional funds, which we're currently operating in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and we're looking to carry that out in East and West Africa and India as well. And I think that the important thing there is also to ground yourself, what we're looking to do is ground ourselves in local advisors that, again, are looking at that complexity about what really constitutes an agroecological transition. So I think it's some of it, I think, is a bit challenging for funding organizations to be able to rely on the ears and eyes of local advisors that are looking at the landscape holistically. And then to just change patterns. And I think that one of the things we see here, because one of the questions that was posed is what is one thing we need to be doing, and that's to be really to be funding smaller and smaller units of organization networks and organizations that are working in a territory. And that's very challenging for us as funders, because many of us have much bigger pots of public money or private money. It's hard to reach those kind of grassroots organizations, but yet at the same time, we know that the solution is really to provide them with the resources they need, also because they look out for the whole, they look out for the well-being of their communities and their families. So I think that that's something we need to struggle with as funders, is to make sure that our resources are reaching at the most community level and are advised by people that are very close to the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Sena, I think on your question of what are we talking about when we talk about funding agroecology, I think there was an excellent response, because if you include those actors that you are trying to fund in the selection of the sort of projects in a participatory and inclusive way, I think you can actually design quite good funding portfolios that take into consideration that very same question. So I think we also almost have to close off this meeting. It's almost 5 o'clock. I just want to ask basically every of the speaker to really give a 1-minute reflection on what are follow-up steps actually. What are some lessons learned, and what do you think is something that really needs to happen in the future to make sure that funding becomes more accessible and inclusive for agroecology than it is at the moment? And I will start with Marie-Laure maybe, and then we'll give the floor to Doina here online.
Thank you, Stefan. Well, I think I would like to conclude, listening to all the interventions today and the statements. Indeed, it's important to, agroecology must not be looked at silos, so therefore it needs to really be mainstream in every process of land use planning at landscape level. So again, I think in this is a big challenge to convene different actors, including private sector, governments, municipalities, local communities, that most of the time have different priorities, but it's important to put everybody in the table and start this dialogue about agroecology and really to mainstream agroecology in these different initiatives of land use planning and land use management in the landscape. So I think this is something really important, and funding should also be considering these kind of activities that are very, very important, not only funding the practices, right, the technical practices, but also considering funding these kind of initiatives of dialogue, of internships, of really having a very legitimate, participatory, inclusive dialogue about agroecology, having all the different actors in the same table. So I think that would be my final reflection. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Then I quickly give the floor to Duina online, also for a 1 minute reflection on lessons learned.
Okay, yes, thank you, Stefan. Just some very final reflection. I think, as Daniel also mentioned, it's very important to organize the networks, to involve the local communities. There's so many experiences there already that we saw that they are working, and it's very important to go to the next step and to scale them up. I think that this is something that the international partners should look at and try to engage in, and of course never miss the importance of the right to food that agroecology has embedded in its own nature. So this is how we do not mix it with other practices. We understand what is the particular traits, what do we are really meaning when we speak about agroecological approaches. So it goes beyond climate, it goes beyond production, it goes beyond nutrition. It's also the access and the right to food. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Duina. Marie-Laure, can we have a final reflection from you?
My final reflection is that in the support we are providing to civil society organizations, to local communities, I think that's something important that is to be factored, is helping them to work on how to scale up or to influence policy with what is being done in terms of promotion of agroecology. That means even at the stage of the design of the project, we have to make sure that there is a component on how we are going to document the knowledge, the skills, and whatsoever that has been derived from the project or the supported initiatives, and how this can be shared with other communities or other stakeholders of the project. Because if we don't work also on how to scale up, on how to influence the local or the regional or the national policy, that means that we will keep staying in one area without being able to make the practice or the use of agroecology being a recognized way of working or doing things by civil society organizations. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie-Laure. Before we actually, and that is something that I haven't mentioned yet, we have some lunch and some drinks there available for all of you, and we would like to thank you all for the patience and despite the technical issues that we were having. But before we will be able to consume some of those things, I would like to give the final word to Anj to provide also a reflection from his side.
Thank you. My last reflection on that dialogue will be, maybe it comes also to a kind of response to Sena from Togo, talking about maybe what next step we can together do. And is bring lots of reflection about how we build convergence to work on agroecology, to not be in silo, as Marion said. And for us also, it is important not to only be focused on the technical aspect of agroecology, but look also the political aspect of agroecology. Because for Africa, for example, we is now become more and more import dependent of all kind of food. How can we, build agroecology without looking that aspect? Also look trade issue. It is very important in terms of promoting agroecology. Thank you.
Thanks, Thanks everyone also for joining, and if you would like to further continue this conversation amongst each other or with the panel members, I would like to invite you all to come in and get some snacks over here. Thank you very much.